Hello, everyone. Welcome to Supply Side 365. Today, we are joined by the Herbal Pharmacist himself, David Foreman.
Hello.
And we are sorry, the little echo. And we are going to chat about stress and anxiety. This is episode 1 of David's monthly webinar here on 365, and it's called Health Conditions Corner. And Dave is going to walk us through what's actually happening chemically in the body when we feel stress and a lot of anxiety. And then we'll talk about what ingredients might help those problems. If you have questions, please wait until David's done talking to ask them. You can actually put them in the chat. He just won't address them until after he's done. So thank you so much for joining us, David, and take it away.
All right. Time to share my screen, right?
Yes, go for it.
All right. Well, that's cool. Let's rock and roll this puppy. Come on, baby. Huh. It is. There we go. You see that okay? Yes?
I can't see it.
I got it. There we go.
There we go.
My deepest apologies. Technology's not been my friend lately. Anyway, like Cassie just said, this is exciting for me and hopefully exciting for you all. For those people who do know me as the Herbal Pharmacist, I'm very much into the science of our industry, trying to recommend or suggest ingredients that do have that scientific substantiation. And the other thing I love to do is just kind of help people understand what's really going on in the body. So if you're watching this right now and you're into R&D, maybe even just sales and marketing, this will let you inside my head as to how I feel like we should first understand what's going on beneath in the body, so to speak, so that we can better understand of like how to pick what ingredient that addresses all those possible underlying physiological or biochemical things. So this is a pseudo deep dive today on stress and anxiety. And come on, slide, move. All right, it's not going to move. I'll advance it manually. Again, technology's not been my friend lately. Apparently, I've just got bad energy. I thought before we even get into like the whole physiology, biochemistry of this condition of stress, I thought it'd be good just to show you that this category, just mental wellness, really, so not just stress, but sleep and cognition are supposed to be just these large areas moving forward, primarily from COVID. And I hate reading slides to people, so I'll just kind of summarize. We can see pre-pandemic that stress was definitely an interest, of interest to people. The whole thing of 54% of 18 to 29-year-olds, frequently experience stress. 1/3 of the people globally reported feeling stressed or worried. One of the most staggering statistics, I don't have it on here. I tried to keep this actually a little bit more US centric, but the World Health Organization had a statement they published, I believe, a little over a year ago, saying that the pandemic was going to increase the amount of anxiety and depression by over 25% globally. So if you're one of those weird, I hate to say weird, don't insult people, but you claim that you have no stress. I usually say, if you say you have no stress, then you probably don't have any breath in your lungs. We all have some sort of stress going on. I don't need to get into the why, but as you can see from the numbers, the amount of stress that people are experiencing through COVID and now post-COVID are real. And this gives us an opportunity to really have a positive impact on people's health. So this is one of my favorite slides, and it's really just kind of get people to think, start getting your head outside the box, which is usually where my head starts, and really understand that, we have this big bushy tree that's stress above the ground, but really what's going on underneath. And in this case, we're going to talk today primarily about chronic stress, not acute. Acute stress is actually the way the body responds and reacts is actually a very healthful response. The problem that we end up developing is when we have that chronic stress, those prolonged periods of stress that lead to adrenal fatigue, our hormones getting out of balance. I'll explain what that is in a couple of slides in the future here. That chronic stress actually ends up leading to nutrient depletion. So we need to look at maybe addressing those when we're formulating. And then, of course, chronic stress ends up making our neurotransmitters get out of balance for multiple reasons. So like I said, I like to talk about where everything begins in stress. So when I have a stress impulse, I'm sitting at a traffic light and I witness a car accident from the lanes going, somebody ran a red light. Just that whole experience, when that happens, is an acute stress. There's a signal that goes to my brain, probably in this case from my eyes and my ears, because I heard it and I saw it. And it goes to the stress center of your brain, which is the hypothalamus. The amygdala also plays an important role in that. So this is where it all starts. And actually, even if it's not a mental stress or emotional stress, whatever you want to call it, even a physical stressor will also trigger this same response. So we now go from this micro picture of just the hypothalamus stress center of the brain. I'm going to show you really what this whole thing is. We in the medical profession call it the HPA axis, H for hypothalamus, P for pituitary, 3 for adrenals. And so what happens is that stress signal, again, whether it's physical or mental, goes to the hypothalamus and or the amygdala. And all of a sudden, the hypothalamus sends a chemical messenger to the pituitary to notify the adrenals that, hey, you know what, we got something going on here. And the adrenals will then produce 3 primary hormones / neurotransmitters, and you all can hopefully read. They're cortisol, norepinephrine, and epinephrine. Now, there is a really cool thing in acute stress. There's this negative feedback. That's what those circle and minus signs are. So that release will then end up going backwards, backfold, back upstream, so to speak, and has the ability to turn off, let the pituitary know, whoa, slow down, pump your brakes. You know, you can stop now, or it can go all the way to the hypothalamus. Regretfully, when we get into those modes of chronic stress, the system is like the gerbil wheel, man. It just doesn't stop. It keeps going and going and going. So why is that important? Well, I really want to focus in on the effect of the adrenals, because granted, some of those other hormones that go, that trigger the impulse between the hypothalamus and pituitary, or the pituitary and the adrenals, actually can have a negative effect on the body. Really, where the big negative effect happens chronically in the body is because of the release of the, like I talked about earlier, norepinephrine, epinephrine, / adrenaline, and or the stress hormone cortisol. And increases in cortisol will increase insulin resistance. If you're not familiar with that, basically it's you have plenty of insulin floating around in your bloodstream, but for whatever reason, your cells have become numb to it, don't even realize it's there. So what ends up happening is you end up with higher levels of insulin that can trigger major cardiovascular inflammation in the body and a lot of other health problems. You also end up, because your cells are resistant to insulin, you now end up usually getting a buildup in blood sugar as well, which is even worse for the body. So this actually triggers metabolic syndrome or metabolic disorders. So instead of your body using that sugar as energy, it gets stored as fat. And if anybody ever realized, like, hey, I've been so stressed out over the last few years and I've gained, 5-10 pounds a year, the good possible underlying reason is you've had chronic stress. You probably have insulin resistance. You probably have increased blood sugar. And actually, years ago, I was going through a traumatic life event. My cortisol level was ridiculous, like 2 times the normal high. And I witnessed all these things happening to me. So you also get your immune system alters. And perhaps, Cassie, in the future, we could do just a seminar or one of these webinars on the effect of stress and sleep on the immune system. The next webinar we're going to do is actually on the immune system, but I probably won't have time to cover that exact topic. But we get a really screwed up immune system where we're not producing enough immune cells, and or they become ineffective. And so we're opening ourselves up to more infections. How many people out there right now, when they have adrenal fatigue or they're just super fried and tired all the time, end up getting sick? This is why. We get suppressed digestive system. So we get digestive disorders, decreased sex hormones. I'll explain that a little bit more in my next slide. And then, of course, this production of adrenaline, norepinephrine, triggers an increase in heart rate and an increase in blood pressure. What's that look like? Well, here you go. Chronic stress and its impact on health. And actually, I could have expanded this even more. I'm actually working on another presentation the last few days, and it's almost like I have too many little red arrows on the slide. I've got to figure out how to tighten it all up. But this chronic stress impact because of cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine will trigger mental health conditions. We're talking about stress. We're talking about anxiety. We're talking about depression. We're talking about decreased cognitive function. Respiratory orders. There's direct connections between chronic stress and how well people manage their COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or in children, we know that stress can actually trigger an asthma attack, or and in this case with respiratory, it's a vicious little cycle of you already have trouble breathing, which is stressful. Oh, and then the stress makes your breathing more challenging. And again, it's another one of those little wheels that keeps spinning around and around. Cardiovascular health. I already mentioned earlier the effect of having like elevated blood sugar and or insulin levels can do to the cardiovascular system. So we end up with elevated blood fats. We end up with thickening of the blood. We end up with increase in oxidative stress or damage to the vascular wall. So then we end up possibly with increased plaque buildup. And again, it's one of those little snowballs that just keeps building downhill. And if you live in a warm climate, you've never seen snow, you have no idea what I just said with a snowball going downhill. Well, let's just say it's an additive effect or a building effect. Digestive disorders. Because of inflammation, we can go to those inflammatory bowel conditions. We see constipation and diarrhea. Everybody reacts a little different. Reproductive issues. I mentioned earlier the effect on sex hormones. So we see a decrease for men in being able to produce sperm. Women, same thing with ovulating and or the egg and the sperm meeting. We see decreased libido. We see, all these things that contribute to reproductive issues. Even with sexual desire, we see that go down. The ability to climax, all those types of things. Again, if there's probably people listening to this right now going, dude, I had no idea that stress could have been the reason why, I was having an issue with erectile dysfunction. Or there's a woman watching right now that's saying, wow, I had no idea that this caused a hormone deficiency. And that's perhaps why my PMS is worse than it used to be, or my symptoms from menopause. They all go together. Muscle issues from chronic pain, headaches, etc. And then you can, everybody can read. So metabolic disorders, I sort of kind of beat that one up already. Fatigue, I already talked about chronic fatigue, immune disorders, and endocrine disorders really encompasses all things hormonal. And because of the way the hormonal system or endocrine system is wired, when you push too hard over here or decrease over here, you start throwing all of the hormones out of whack eventually as we go down the road. So this kind of gives you an idea of why stress is so important and why we might want to take a good look at when we're formulating for not stress. We're formulating for cardiovascular health. We're formulating for concentration and focus. We're concentrating on formulating for a new product for headaches or whatever. Stress should be, or a stress ingredient should be considered one of those things that goes into your mix, because it could be the underlying reason as to why that person has blood sugar issues or cholesterol problems, and you get the idea. So before I go any further, you're going to see slides with ingredients listed on them. Some of them are trade names, some aren't. If your ingredient fits into this category and did not get mentioned, please do not email me and whine and complain that it did not get listed, okay? I couldn't possibly list everything here. So I picked some of the ingredients that I'm fond of. I maybe have my own personal experiences with, and or for whatever. So in this case, I divided the next 3 slides up into those areas I talked about with the underlying reasons of where stress is impacting you. And then the 3 slides that showed the effect on the limbic system, the brain, starting with the hypothalamus or the amygdala, or the adrenals, or just neurotransmitter production. So I've divided it up into these areas. So if I'm formulating, I'd really like to hit all 3 of those, which means I may have to use 2, 3, 4 ingredients to really get the desired effect if I really want to nail the stress effect in the best possible way. So with regards to the limbic system, the 2 branded ingredients I listed here, Afron, which is a patented saffron ingredient here in the US. It's patented for use in mood and stress. One of the mechanisms of action is softening the brain signal. So in this case, you're softening the signal leading from the brain through that HPA axis. Zembrin actually has a clinical study they did with MRI studies in people who took Zembrin. And then 2 hours later, they did an MRI study, and you could see it calming down the stress center of the brain. And then other ingredients that are not necessarily branded or trademarked or whatever that are good for the limbic system are those omega-3s. Primarily, in this case, DHA, EPA does play a role. And then the oldie but goodie from Peter Rabbit's, fairy tale or whatever you want to call it, chamomile or chamomile, depending on what part of the world you live in. But these are all things that you can work well with the limbic system. Neurotransmitter support. Yeah, I'm talking about Afron here again, because they do have mechanism of action showing that it has an effect on the primary neurotransmitters, including the big one, serotonin. So in this case, the ingredients I've listed here are either going to have an effect directly on neurotransmitters, maybe perhaps inhibiting or slowing the reuptake, meaning they're out at the nerve ending longer, having their positive effect. In this case, serotonin is what we want. Or I'm going to that nutrient depletion side of things where I'm giving you suggestions of magnesium, P5P, 5-HTP, or phosphatidylcholine or serine. Those 4 nutrients are critical for the manufacturing of all of your neurotransmitters. So if you're under chronic stress, you may not have enough of the raw materials to produce your own neurotransmitter. So again, this slide sort of encompasses one, that neurotransmitter depletion I talked about, the slide that had the tree, but it's also addressing the nutrient depletion component of dealing with or formulating for chronic stress. And then for whatever reason, this is not, there we go. And then last but not least, adrenal support. You're going to see a little overlap here. The mother of all mother, the king of all kings, when it comes to adrenal support, I think we can all probably say the word all together. 1, 2, 3, ashwagandha, right? Who doesn't like saying that word? Yes, there are several patented, clinically substantiated ingredients. The 2 big ones, KSM 66 and Sensoril, I feel like they have a battle on who's done the most research. But adaptogens are really awesome for adrenal support. And of all of them, probably the most revered, like I said, is ashwagandha. But there's some other really killer players, like a Bacopa. Reishi probably falls into the same thing. Holy basil is another one of my favorite ingredients for stress that's also in that adaptogen category. And then adrenal support. When our adrenals are fried, we need more P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, basically B6 times with 5-phosphate groups around it. B6 plays an important role in re-nourishing, and so does magnesium. So for those people who are under chronic stress, they probably are magnesium deficient, and they're probably B deficient as well. And then, hey, I'm going to try to get you to think outside your norm. We have pill fatigue globally. I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of taking capsules and tablets. So let's try to be creative. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to list out some of the foods that are considered stress friendly. And then if there's a possibility of a way to integrate these into formulating something that's not a tablet or a capsule, maybe a shot, a full-on, 8-ounce beverage, or a stick pack, or part of your protein powder, etc. So granted, it's going to be kind of gross to formulate with fatty fish, but hey, you know what? Maybe then you use krill oil or some sort of fish oil. But again, just try to incorporate these foods while you're formulating. And then this is kind of what it looks like. Sorry, I'm looking away from you guys. Is if you're going to formulate for success, why not begin with finding that supportive food? Okay, so chocolate's really awesome. Dark chocolate, everybody. That milky stuff that's super sweet, not really going to do a lot for you. Matter of fact, that sugar is going to really screw people up when it comes to stress. So we're talking about super dark chocolate, walnuts, oranges, etc. And then look for an ingredient that supports the limbic system. I mentioned Afron, Zembrin. Those are 2 examples. Don't forget to throw in an ingredient that works for adrenal support. Not probably. My favorite on this is really using ashwagandha. But pick an adaptogen of your choice. In some cases, maybe holy basil makes a little bit more sense for you, depending on flavor profile, or whether it's soluble, insoluble, etc. That is not my world. I have friends that do that stuff, so I let them handle it. And then last but not least, look at supporting, neurotransmitter production. In this case, most people that are under chronic stress have nutrient depletion. So in this, maybe not necessarily focusing on the reuptake part, like I mentioned, Afron would do, but perhaps using that the kick butt, we'll call them choline and serine ingredients that are out of the market, or that P5P, magnesium, etc. But again, I know I talk super freak fast, so you'll be able to watch this again on YouTube, which is so totally cool. But I just wanted to give everybody just a kind of a slick, smooth, we'll call it, stress biochemistry physiology 101, because I see when I go to my own health food stores or try to shop online and I'm looking at products that are designed for stress, I see gaps. I see people focusing on one clinically substantiated ingredient, hanging their hat on that, maybe it does work for neurotransmitter reuptake inhibition, which is definitely great. But that person that's been under chronic stress, like probably most of us that are watching right now over the last, at least several years, if not most of our lives, I probably have nutrient deficiency. So for me, like I do actually take a high potency B complex. I do supplement with magnesium. I do take ashwagandha to support the different aspects of stress. So when you're formulating, instead of using pixie dust of those known ingredients that I just might have mentioned, and one clinically substantiated ingredient at therapeutic dose, I think it's time for us to start using therapeutic doses of these ingredients, maybe 2 or 3, and then turning it into some sort of functional supplement that's, if you can, not a tablet or a capsule. And that's all I have for right now. Again, if you have a complaint about I didn't mention your ingredient, I'm encouraging you not to email me, because I've already told you not to. I have a pretty large following on LinkedIn. If you really want to know, I post blogs all the time, all over the place. You can usually find links to that information, other webinars, etc. And Cassie, I think I can take a breath and turn it back to you for like a second. I wasn't paying attention to time, so hopefully we're doing okay.
No, yeah, we're okay. We have about 8 minutes. Would you just stop sharing your screen? And then we can, if anybody has any questions, perfect. Please put them in the chat. And so, David, I was wondering, so we have pretty sciencey words in this limbic system, adaptogen. What responsibility do brands or formulators have in educating people about what these things do, or if I was looking at a bottle, I might not know what those means. How do we bridge that gap?
Yeah, so I had to leave out my consumer front. Like I have 2 heads, and one of them's where I just was. The other one, which is where most of my life has been, was working on that consumer communication. So I think instead of saying limbic system, which will totally scramble a consumer's head, saying it's working in the stress center of your brain. This is where it reacts first. Saying the word adaptogen, that really doesn't mean much to anybody, including a lot of people I know in this industry, which makes me want to sort of cry, but at the same time, I get it. For an adaptogen, it's one of those things that helps your body stay in balance with regards to how it responds to stress. Or it can be mental stress or physical stress, because adaptogens work on, if you're doing 5 cardio exercise, workouts a week, adaptogens would work there as well. So maybe translate those things into helps your body adapt to physical and or emotional stress, or helps keep you in balance. I think consumers get the neurotransmitter thing because of the antidepressant category of SSRI. So people, I think, get that nowadays. Granted, they're all focused on serotonin because of that drug category. So I don't think we really need to translate that as much, but and it is our responsibility. If you have a finished product, I feel like it's your responsibility to have an FAQ part on your website. Mm-hmm. It's not going to go on the bottle. That's unless you do a bottle and then inside of a box, but then are you really being environmentally friendly by having a box around your bottle? Probably not. Or you have a really big one with a huge label. That's still not good. But yeah, at least on your website or downloadable information, I think it's our responsibility to communicate and educate the consumer. And an educated consumer will be a loyal consumer. I can tell you that as well.
How many of these ingredients have an acute effect, or do consumers have to take them for 6 weeks or 8 weeks to feel any different, or are they all sort of different and dependent?
They are different. So I'll give you an example. So acute, if I took the ingredient I mentioned earlier, Zembrin, I would I consider that experiential. Like I can feel it usually within an hour or so. Whereas things like adaptogens aren't usually experiential. They take a little while, especially if you've been under chronic stress and you add an adaptogen. It's not like you're going to be like super freak, chill, and balanced like right away. It takes a little while for that process to happen. And that's where we can go back to educating the consumer on, depending on how you formulate it, letting them know that it could take, there's some adaptogens that are like a Bacopa that have more of that cognitive effect. And, we could say like, hey, you know what? You might start feeling it in 5 days or, so each one, but the nutrients aren't going to necessarily all be like, I take magnesium today. Am I necessarily going to feel it? Probably not. But if I take P5P, I might feel a spike in my energy. Might be a little less fatigued immediately. So it depends on each ingredient. And then it goes back to the dosing. If you're using pixie dust or fairy dust or whatever you want to call it, amounts of these ingredients, it may take forever.
Right.
Hopefully I haven't offended anybody with my commentary. Just keeping myself real.
No, I like it. I'm sure everybody appreciates it. We have a couple, I have a couple more questions.
Okay.
So how, I guess this is, and I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around in subjects here. I know that there is some science that acute stress can be good for you, like exercise, playing a game. When does that turn into chronic stress? And then you did point out things that are happening in the body to watch out for so that you understand your now it's become chronic. But where is that line? And then how do we know what stress to actually be okay with putting ourselves?
So I think it goes back to that whole, what really is like that acute stress is that fight or flight thing, right? So when you witness the car accident or your kid falls off the bed, that adrenaline rush and whatever, when you stop feeling those effects, like you're sweating, your heart rate pounding, those types of things, when you stop feeling it, that's when I feel like that's when you start, you're like, and yet there's something stressful going on in your world. That's when you have to go, this is probably, I probably do have, chronic stress. I can use myself as an example. I was super chill all through COVID. Like I was, everything was great. And then I went through 3 traumatic events back in like May/June. And it took nothing to set me off. And so I was completely out of balance with stress. So the first, week or two, I was definitely like, I had trouble concentrating. I had I was the poster child for that flight or fight thing. And, but then all of a sudden it kind of granted, I tried to get rid of that stressful stuff, but at the same time, all of a sudden my body stopped being as reactionary. And I think it's just because I became fried, there was not much more my body could do. Or I became desensitized to just feeling like crap all the time. No, I mean, honestly, I went through a divorce. I moved across country. I witnessed a plane crash where 2 people died. My mother passed away not long before that. So there were 4 really crazy, heinous things that happened that set me off into this little spin for a while.
Yeah.
Personal there.
This is great. I'm sure everyone appreciates it. We are at time. So thank you so much for coming, and thank everyone who's watching for coming. Look for more of these monthly with David Foreman. And as he teased sort of in there, the next one we're going to talk about is immunity. Yes, the immune system.
Yeah, understanding immunity. I think our industry is failing consumers because we talk about everything's immune support. And the consumer, when they hear immune support, thinks that means it's going to keep them from getting a cold. And that's not what is really going on in a lot of those promotions. So we need to educate ourselves so we can educate the consumer properly.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again, and we'll talk soon. Have a great day. Bye.